they actually fixed it. They actually fixed a big problem that last week's episode of Mushoku Tensei had. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, let me kind of dive headfirst into this. So basically, last week, I talked about how anime-onlys might not fully understand the suffering that Roxy went through, because the episode kind of sped through the rescuing of Roxy because she was trapped within this labyrinth, this teleportation labyrinth, for an entire month by herself. And as I elaborated and talked about in last week's video, I talked about how she had to basically fight non-stop, always on the edge of basically passing out from overexerting herself with her mana usage, and you have to wonder what was she eating. Well, she was eating poisonous, creatures. I mean, we can literally see it on the screen. There's a spider. She was doing anything in her power to stay alive, and hope was running out. If there would have been maybe 1 or 2 seconds late, like for instance, if Rudy would have arrived 1 or 2 seconds late, Roxy probably would have died. She was literally at the end of her ropes, and it's not something an individual or normal person would be able to accomplish. Most people would have died within the first few days. Roxy is incredibly gifted as a mage, but on top of that as well, she is someone that knows how to use magic to a very high degree in comparison to most mages, because she knows her limitations and what she's capable of, which this episode tries to bring up once again, that Roxy is aware of her own capabilities, even as she kind of undermines her own self and she kind of puts her own self down. In reality, she is aware of just how much magic she could cast to conserve her strength. So with all that being said, basically the beginning of this episode, like the first, I would say 30 or so seconds, maybe a minute or so, we literally see her, writing down days. This is a big part right here that's very subtle, but you see these, itches in the wall, which basically showcases, different ways she's tried to get through this passage, maybe how many days have passed, all these different things. These are the thoughts that can enter into someone's mind while watching, this sequence before you get actual context. And I think that this is legitimately amazing, just showcasing how hard she's been struggling to get out of here. She hasn't just been sitting there waiting to die, like a static NPC, so to speak, waiting for a rescue quest from the MC. She legitimately was doing everything in her power to survive. And I think that legitimately this goes along with what has been great with the writing of Mushoku Tensei up to this very point, is that, the world feels, lived in. It doesn't feel static. It doesn't feel like there's an NPC sitting in the town waiting for the MC to pop up and talk with them to initiate a quest that just is them going to point A to point B, so to speak. There is actually progression and, characters moving from place to place and living their lives while the MC isn't around. And I love that. This episode perfectly showcases one of those themes that has always been, very present within Mushoku Tensei since the very beginning. But enough with the glazing of Roxy. What I'm trying to say is that, the point is that we got basically more clarity to the struggle she went through. There is obviously a little bit that is still cut here that I did talk about in my previous video of how she, had to use the bathroom in the exact same spot, like basically in a hole, hiding from monsters, etc. You gotta imagine you're gonna be very stinky, and she does mention that she smells really bad to Rudy. Literally when Rudy appears, I'm gonna actually show the scene, he straight up, grabs her, and he, I'll let you hear it, just, I'll let the words and sounds from him kind of explain it. My man is sniffing her hard, and it's just, you gotta imagine, she has been literally without a shower/bath or anything for a full month, covered probably in just filth of the labyrinth, but the cave, and then you gotta imagine the dental hygiene. She hasn't brushed her teeth in so long, but on top of that, she had to use the bathroom in a close vicinity with her being near it, and just continuously for a full month. Her stench is probably ungodly. It is probably something that would just load an entire room. If she was to enter into a room, you would smell her from probably 30 feet away. That is probably just the smell she probably has. But I think that regardless of just the realistic nature of it, I think a big part here is that Rudy coming in to save her, and he's doing this very degenerate act. In the same way, it's basically him, saying how much he missed her, and you can take it for comedic purposes, whatever. It's funny. It is definitely funny, but I think it also just shows that, once again, he realized just how dangerous the situation was, and he's glad he was able to save his master, Roxy. But, anyways, yeah, let's dive headfirst into this. So, yeah, they corrected a big problem. I mean, I think that is honestly I put the cart before the horse. I apologize. I was unaware of Mushoku Tensei's anime game, even though it's obviously proven that they're willing to go far to adapt it to the best of their capabilities. I mean, it's not perfect, but they did a good job. So, anyways, let's segue over to something that I really loved about this episode, and I feel like, some are gonna get it, some are not going to get it. It's going to be a very interesting topic point for a lot of people, and I wanted to mention it. So, Paul comes in, and he showcases that he doesn't just use one sword anymore, he uses two swords. And this entire little moment here is a very important context to what he was trying to tell Rudy, because there was a scene literally right before this when he walks up to Rudy, he's talking about like, oh, I'll tell you when we get out of here and all that, and he looks over at Roxy, he's like, I got something to tell you, and it's implied it's about Roxy, because he looks at her, but he's like, I can't say anything because it could obviously hurt the party's morale. He doesn't want to do that, especially when the whole objective is to keep everybody safe, but also get back Zenith and save her. So, yeah, he doesn't want to bring down the mood, etc., or bring up a very difficult topic that, just people don't want to hear at this given moment, because it's a very important life decision to make. But the big part here is that Paul acts like he's going to say something. He says he'll wait until after it's all over, but then he gets up, he talks about his swords. At face value, you're just looking at a man that obviously has evolved his fighting style. You think about basically episode 1, 2, and early episodes of season 1, we saw Paul only using one sword. He was really strong, but, he only used one. And now fast forwarding to season 2, episode 21, you see this man casually wielding two swords around, and yeah, he definitely uses two swords, but it was more of a metaphor to his current lifestyle. And what he meant by this is that he was meeting his wives. We know that Paul has quite the, how can I say, flawed character backstory. I mean, like, look what he did to his wife, okay? Back in season 1, early stages, he cheated on his wife and all that when she believed in the church of just basically a one-person relationship, just one, a single individual, and he cheated on his wife, and we know the reasons behind it, but regardless of whatever happened, the point is, it did happen, and it caused Paul to have two wives at that point, and he had a kid with both wives. And it caused a lot of drama, a lot of controversy, but obviously they were able to get through it, and he's here now. He's here to save his, original wife. And what he means by the two swords is both of his wives, and that he can't let go of one or the other. They're both very precious to him. He has to protect them. Both swords are used to protect each individual wife. Once again, it's very on the nose. I feel like anyone that is able to recognize certain things will obviously get what's going on here. You don't have to be a light novel reader or, someone that has to really do deep dives to understand what he's meaning by this, but it makes sense why maybe Rudy might not catch it, because obviously we're watching the series as just watchers. We are observers of this world. We know that this is an anime. We know that this isn't technically reality, and so we look at things, and certain things are said in little cues, obviously meaning a lot, when in reality, Rudy is just there in person in his world, and he's not going to catch those cues that obviously the animators tried to show us. So, it's understandable why he's not able to understand what Paul is getting at, but the the matter is that Paul was talking about his wives, and he was mentioning to Rudy about Roxy and Sylphie, and how that potentially might lead to him having another wife. So yeah, I know that was very long-winded, but I wanted to talk about this little piece of writing that was just really nice. I don't know, I know it's very simple, but I love it. I appreciate stuff like that, those little details, basically showcasing that yes, there is a lot of complications with Rudy and Roxy's relationship. I mean, this entire episode, you pretty much see Roxy straight up just hitting on this man. Like, there's multiple moments where she's just watching Rudy, she's smiling, she's wiggling her feet, etc. It's clear she's coming on to him quite a bit. And, she obviously, one of her big objectives, which I mentioned at the beginning of my last episode review, her big objective was to find a man in a labyrinth that would save her. Basically, a knight in shining armor, so to speak, to come in and save the day. That's exactly what Rudy did. He came and saved her. She also did promise him a long time ago that, if he's still interested in her, she would definitely, potentially marry him or go out with him, and it's clear that day has finally come. And in Roxy's mind here, I want to make sure I set the actual field properly for we all understand we're all on the same page. we all know that Rudy is married. We know he has a kid on the way. And in this episode, Rudy didn't necessarily do anything too bad. Obviously, he was a little bit overly friendly with Roxy to the whole sniffing thing, but, I mean, this man has a shrine of Roxy, so, I mean, you know what he's doing with that shrine. But, I mean, with that being said, this man has always had an attachment to Roxy thanks to her saving him, and I think that regardless of a few things that he said in his head or whatever, he didn't go too far. He's still very committed to Sylphie. He even mentions that in this episode, when, he agrees to going with Roxy on an adventure to go into another labyrinth, he said he would, but then right after that, he mentions to himself, wait a minute, I'm about to be a dad with a kid and all that, I'm probably not going to have time to be able to go on a labyrinth. I can't just walk out on my kid. So, the big point here is that Rudy was just saying it in the moment, because obviously it's just been so long since he's seen her, he just wanted to be happy and just talk with her about old times and continue to see her, but obviously reality set in and he realized about his kid, and that, he probably can't go off adventuring like he wants because he needs to take care of his kid. So yeah, the point here is that Rudy tries to keep himself more or less in check for the most part. While Roxy, she is someone that is unaware of Rudy's lifestyle. She is unaware that he's married. She's unaware that he has a kid on the way, because why would she know? She's been literally trapped in a whole dungeon for a full month. She's been doing her own quest to try to find Zenith. She probably didn't know anything about anything with the marriage and stuff. I mean, Paul literally just found out. So you factor all of this in, yeah, it makes a lot of sense why she would assume Rudy is single. So her hitting on him or anything isn't necessarily a bad thing. She just has no idea. You could maybe say Rudy's leading her on, but overall, it's a very interesting dynamic between the two characters, which gets into the big point. And that is, what is Rudy going to do? Obviously, we know for a fact that Rudy is living in a world that does have those type of relationships, of like poly relationships, so to speak. We've seen it with Paul, and that was the point I was talking about when it came to this conclusion part of the episode. And will Rudy do the exact same thing with Roxy, or will he remain 100% completely faithful to Sylphie? There's a lot of, things that pop up, because depending on his course of action will depend on his overall relationship, not just with Sylphie, but also with Roxy going forward. And on top of that, will Sylphie be okay with it? Will Roxy be okay with it? If theoretically that was to happen or not happen, there's a lot of ways to take it. So yeah, I really just like the interesting dynamic that this episode brings up. There's a lot of drama that could potentially pop up from this, and that just goes to show the quality of an author, to be able to do that, weave all these different threads together and still bring stuff up that's not even around. For instance, like Sylphie and stuff, that's not even around right now in the plot. That's not necessary technically for the plot to be still relevant to the plot because of Roxy's introduction, or reintroduction, so to speak. Now, with all that being said, I'm pushing all that. We need to talk about Paul for a second, and just this father-son dynamic that's been going on. It's extremely wholesome, and I think anyone looking at this episode is going to be just smiling and happy, because it's really unique seeing this, because, I mean, obviously, the last time we saw Paul was a big argument between Paul and Rudy, and they made up, yeah, we know that, and, we saw a little brief moments in last episode, but to actually see them working together and just having these wholesome father-son bonding moments, Paul's able to talk with Rudy, potentially give him advice, Rudy saying, oh, you're very strong and all that, and Paul getting very happy and giddy, it's very wholesome, and I love that, and I think that overall, just, thinking about what this episode does, it really makes you appreciate Paul as a character. He's flawed. He's not a perfect human being by any means. He's far from it. I've talked about him a lot in previous videos, so I'm not going to reinstate everything I've said in the past, but he's a good character, and I love seeing him back in the dynamic with all of our main cast, and seeing him interacting with Rudy, because Rudy does need a father figure at this time. I mean, this man is about to be a father himself, so he needs someone that is a father in his life to potentially guide him and help him out to do the right thing, so to speak. So it's just great. I mean, I love this. It's a really great moment, and I can't wait to see more of it, and more of their relationship going forward throughout the upcoming, episodes and seasons. It's going to be wonderful. But with that being said, thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate all of you, and, if you enjoyed the video, do leave me a like. It does help me out a lot, and I love you guys. Be safe, stay healthy. Chibi out.